Hello YouTube, welcome back to the Card Combo Show, episode number 35, me Chocobilly, where we look at the weird and wonderful combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week I'm going to be looking at a lot of multicolour cards. Thancred from Opus 12, Lenna from Opus 12, Yuzuki from Opus 13, Unei from Opus 13, and Hope from Opus 13, so a lot of recent cards. So, first and foremost, we'll go with the one non-multicolour, the light card Lenna. She is a 3CP 8k forward with the text, when Lenna enters the field, place one Arise counter on Lenna for each backup you control. When a backup enters your field, place one Arise counter on Lenna. Dull, remove X Arise counters from Lenna, choose one forward in your break zone. If it is cost X, play it onto the field. So she has some really good abilities. She's above curve as well, which makes her extra strong, and she's a Warrior of Light, so she combos well into, wall decks. So something like Mion works well because you can play Mion onto the field. That will give Lenna a Rise counter, but Mion can also bounce backups back to your hand. You can then replay that backup, and that will give Lenna another Arise counter. Now you can combine this with the likes of Yargrosh, which means that you can play Mion to bounce Yargrosh. You get to draw a card, you get to put an Arise counter on Lenna, but then you can replay Yargrosh to put Mion back into your hand, another Arise counter on Lenna. You can then replay Mion, and you see where I'm going with this. This will sound very familiar to some people. You can also do a similar sort of thing with Althea as well. Althea can reactivate when she enters the field, which is good, and then you also get to put an Arise counter on Lenna, but you can also dull Althea to put a character you control back into your hand, so again, another backup, and all of this works amazingly well with, obviously, Dorgann, a Dorgann deck. So Lenna's good because obviously it can bring Dorgann back onto the field as well, because, when Dorgann enters the field and you start getting all these backups coming up and down, your opponent wants to do whatever they can to get rid of Dorgann, so being able to revive Dorgann with Lenna is also good, but it also, these two cards work nicely with the whole just replaying backups constantly. Luca, so a Earth and Dull, put Luca into the break zone, choose one backup that costs 3 or less in your break zone, play it onto the field. So I like Luca because she can play a backup of any colour, which is great, but it also obviously can combo into the fact that Lenna gets an Arise counter. So you can combo this with the likes of Graham, so when Graham comes in, you will deal 9k to a forward of your choosing. Choose one forward your opponent controls, sorry. And again, that obviously combos into Lenna being able to revive something with her Rise counters. Now, this is good because you can use it on your opponent's turn. So, Lenna doesn't have a restriction on when she can use her Dull and remove X counters. So you could, in your opponent's phase, they may be like, oh, Lenna's got 3 counters on her. That means that she won't be able to use her Rise to get X forward back, but you could, maybe your opponent's forgotten about Luca, you can then use Luca to bring in Graham. Graham will deal 9k something, you can then use Lenna to then bring something else onto the field during your opponent's turn. Similarly, you can use Chelinka, so Chelinka can come in, give Lenna a Rise counter, and also give her Brave, so she can attack twice this turn as well. And obviously, if your opponent doesn't have any means of blocking Lenna, you can get 2 attacks through, and then she'll still be Brave, ready to use her Dull ability if you need to. And Althea can reactivate, so say you've got a couple of counters on Lenna, and you can revive something, but you also want to attack as well. You just attack with Lenna, she goes Dull, you then use Luca to bring in Althea to reactivate Lenna, to then use Lenna's revive ability. And Monk. When Monk enters the field, choose one job Monk or card named Monk in the break zone, add it to your hand. So Monk's great because it gets a Monk card back to your hand, and then Lenna obviously can combo with getting another Monk onto the field as well, and being that she's a light card, it means that Lenna can go well in a Monk deck. Riku. When Riku enters the field, choose up to 5 backups you control, return to your owner's hand. So it's a bit silly, well, it's not silly, but it's a bit crazy to do this because you'd obviously have to pay for all the backups to replay them, but it's just a silly way to be able to combo things. And again, this would work well with a Dorgann deck, so you just play Riku, use all your backups to play Riku onto the field, you get everything back to hand, you then play a few backups, and again, you could use Mion and Yargrosh to just combo this out as well. And then use Lenna to reactivate something. Maybe you play more backups that reactivates Lenna and some of your backups as well, something like forecast backup Barts, and you can just keep it on rolling. Oh yeah, talking of which, yeah, there you go, Barts. So obviously Barts would give Lenna an Arise counter. Maybe you've used Lenna once, you can then play Barts to reactivate both Lenna and your backups to play more backups to then use Lenna again. Ramza. So at damage 5, when Ramza enters the field, play 1 category FFT character from your hand onto the field, and obviously he can get you an FFT character other than himself from the break zone when he enters the field. So you could use Lenna to revive Ramza onto the field, who would then himself get a FFT character from the break zone, both from your hand and onto the field if you're at 5 damage, and that would then give Lenna another Arise counter. And similarly, you can do that with Marsh. When Marsh enters the field, choose 1 category FFTA character of cost 3 or less in your break zone, play it onto the field. And, you know, you don't even have to use Lenna to play these cards. The fact that Marsh gets a nice cost reduction means that you can use that just to get more FFT or more backups onto the field to play into Lenna's Dull ability. Okay, Hope. Here's a dual color Ice Wind 3 CP 8k board. When an active character your opponent controls becomes dull due to your summons or abilities, freeze it. And when a dull character you control becomes active due to your summons or abilities, choose up to 2 characters you control, activate them. This effect will only trigger once per turn. So he is a crazy good card. I'm glad he's only a rare, because if they made him a legend, then he would be the Chase Legend, because this is gross. But yeah, being able to just freeze something out when it becomes dull is crazy. The fact that that is only once per turn as well is kind of horrible, but it's worth noting that your opponent's characters that become dull, they have to be active. So it's not a case of you just dull something that's already dull and then it also becomes frozen. It has to be active. And similarly, obviously, you when a dull character you control becomes active, so you can't just activate an already active character to then activate 2 more. That has to be dull. So Ash, one of her effects when you go to your attack phase is choose 1 character, activate it. So just from going to your attack phase, you get to activate 3 characters. So that's pretty good. Mutsuki, when a forward opponent controls put from the field into the break zone, activate Mutsuki. And obviously she's got the dull, choose 1 forward opponent controls, deal at 1000 damage. So you could just break something, which, you know, Fire's pretty good at doing, and that would reactivate Mutsuki, which then gets to reactivate more things as well. And, you know, Fire Ice goes well together, and Ice does have the ability to create wind CP, so, you know, playing Hope isn't unheard of. But you can combo this with Little Mumba, which seems like a bit of a strange combination, but ultimately to use Mumba and Mutsuki together, it's only 3 CP, and if you do reactivate Mutsuki by breaking something, then you get that 3 CP back, which is pretty good. But what you would need to do is use Mutsuki first, so dull her to deal 1k to something, and provided this is a forward that can be broken through damage and doesn't have like a Minwu effect, you deal at 1k damage, and then you let that resolve. Once that's resolved, you can just cast your Mumba, and no matter what they do to buff it, it will always receive its damage minus 1k, and it's already taken 1k damage, which means that forward will pop, and then you get to reactivate Mutsuki and 2 more characters. Eduardo. When Eduardo enters the field, dull all the characters your opponent controls. So if, let's say hypothetically, your opponent couldn't do anything last turn, and they left all their forwards active, all their backups active, and then on your turn, with Hope, you play Eduardo. You get to dull and freeze everything. That's... that's gross. Oh. So Warrior of Light, when a drop standard unit forward enters the field, choose up to 2 backups, activate them. So you can activate 2, and then using Hope, activate 2 more. So even a 4 CP job standard unit forward is now effectively free. Yeah, that's just really, really good. You can combo it with the likes of Mystic Knight as well. So when Mystic Knight enters the field, choose up to 2 backups. If the cost paid to play Mystic Knight included win CP, activate them. So you've got Warrior Light reactivating things, you've got Mystic Knight reactivating things, and you've got Hope reactivating things. And you can combo this into playing summon, so you reactivate some, and then you play something else, and then you reactivate some more, and you play something else, and you reactivate some more, and you play something else. What's also great is that Mystic Knight also reduces the cost of your ice summons by 1, and obviously a lot of ice summons like to dull things out. That can combo into Hope's duller character, it then becomes frozen. So yeah, Mystic Knight and Warrior of Light work fantastically well with Hope. Emperor. The characters your opponent controls cannot use special or action abilities. This might seem like a bit of a strange combo, but ultimately, like I said at the beginning, your opponent's characters have to be active and then made dull through your own actions to actually become frozen as well. So by playing the Emperor, it means that your opponent's ability to dull their own forwards or backups or whatever through, you know, dull abilities or action abilities to, you know, be able to survive Hope's dull and freeze effect mitigated. So, for example, your opponent might have a 5 cost Golbez. Which if you play a Lightning and Dull, reveal the top card. If it's a forward, play it onto the field. If you play Emperor, they can no longer dull out Golbez because Emperor's on the field, and then you could use Hope, or you could have Hope on the field, dull out that Golbez, he then becomes dull and therefore frozen. Thancred, a lightning, a water, 7 CP, 8k forward. When Thancred enters the field, choose one forward in your break zone. If its cost is equal to or less than the number of water forwards and or water backups you control, play it onto the field. When Thancred attacks, choose one active forward your opponent controls. If its cost is equal to or less than the number of lightning forwards and or lightning backups you control, break it. So he's got some really pretty decent effects, to be honest. He costs a lot, but if you can get his effects off, they're fantastic. So first, Glorka, just being able to reduce Thancred's costs by even a little bit is great, and the fact that Thancred will probably be bringing something onto the field as well means that recurs even more of his cost. So yeah, making him only cost 6 CP, and you also get a plus 1k buff to something as well. That's pretty good. Dusk. So let's say you had played Thancred and you were to bring Dusk out of the break zone, sorry, onto the field. You then pay 1 water. That allows Dusk to then play a forward of cost 3 less from your hand onto the field as well. So hypothetically, let's say you had Glorka already on the field. You pay 6 for Thancred. You then have saved 1 CP. That 1 CP you can use to pay for Dusk's ability, which will then play something else onto the field. The Oracle of Light. So when the Oracle of Light is put from the field into the break zone, you may remove the Oracle of Light from the game. When you do so, choose one job sign of the 7th Dawn in your break zone, play it onto the field dull. Doesn't matter that Thancred comes in dull, because when he comes in, he can get some water forward from your break zone and play that onto the field as well. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, when Thancred plays it onto the field, it comes in active, so that's good. But ultimately, be able to just recur Thancred is awesome. Delusionary Knight. This is a bit of a weird one, but when Delusionary Knight enters the field, you may search for one job mannequin other than water and add it to your hand. Now, 2 of the fantastic cards that came in with, actually, to be all the mannequins in Opus 13 were fantastic, but, you know, it's water lightning, so Thancred could get play Delusionary Knight onto the field. Delusionary Knight could then get you your Delusionary Warlock, which is lightning, so it fits into Thancred, and then you can play that to then continue searching. Now, the one drawback to this is the fact that if you're in mannequins, the chances are you won't have that many water or that many lightning characters on the field, which is what synergizes so nicely with Thancred. But if you are going for more of a water lightning themed deck, and you know you want to use these guys, then it's definitely worth it. Urianger. I always want to call him Urianger when I'm reading his name, but it's actually pronounced Urianger, I think. When Urianger enters the field, you may play one monster of cost 2 or less from your hand onto the field. When you do so, choose one forward opponent controls, return it to its owner's hand. So, similar with Dusk, you play Thancred to play Urianger, to play a monster, to bounce something, and hopefully the monster will have an entry effect as well. And again, similarly, Strago. When Strago enters the field, choose one forward your opponent controls, return to its owner's hand. Then you may play one character of the same cost as it from your hand onto the field. So let's go down the rabbit hole, shall we? It's also worth noting that when Thancred enters the field, or not just enters the field, but when he attacks, and both his abilities, he counts himself because he is obviously a lightning and a water character. But yeah, so let's say you play Thancred onto the field, and Thancred is your 5th water character, and Strago's in the break zone, so you play him onto the field. You decide to bounce something of 3 cost, at which point you play Dusk from your hand. You play Dusk onto the field, you pay 1 water CP, who then plays Urianger. Urianger then goes to play a little electric jellyfish. You've just paid, well, 8. It's only 7 though, if you do have Glorka on the field, which would be quite funny. To play Thancred, Strago, Dusk, Urianger, and an electric jellyfish, which would result in, obviously, bouncing 2 forwards with Strago and Urianger. An electric jellyfish comes in and can give something haste. You could give Thancred haste, and, you know, if you've got a couple of lightning backups, and you've just gained 2 lightning forwards through playing Thancred and Urianger, electric jellyfish can give Thancred haste. Thancred can attack, and if that breaks something, that's fantastic, and you can also use electric jellyfish to dull something out of the way as well. Now, this is very much a planets aligning sort of play, because one, you would need to play Thancred into Strago, so you need to have enough water characters for that. and Strago would need to bounce something of 3 CP to be able to play Dusk. You would also need Dusk, Oriange, and Electric Jellyfish all in your hand, with Strago in the break zone, and, you know, Thancred as well to be able to play him to get all this off, and also to be able to pay the 1 CP for Dusk's ability. But, you know, it could happen, and it would be hilarious if it did. Beatrix, yeah, so she doesn't cost much, and when she enters the field, all your forwards gain plus 2,000 power. If you've got Glauca as well, it means that something can gain another K on top of that. So plus 3K, and, you know, Knights are fantastic, and Knights work well with Lightning Water. Similarly, Ovalia works well in Knights, and being able to flicker Thancred to be able to, oh no, he's left the field, or just give him haste. So he comes into the field, he brings in something, you then use Ovalia to give Thancred haste, he attacks, he breaks something, and if he dies as well, he gets to flicker and bring something else in. Pretty good. Unei. So when Unei enters the field, choose 2 summons, each with a different cost in your break zone. Your opponent selects 1 summon among them. You may cast the other summon without paying the cost. If you cast it, remove the summon from the game after use instead of putting it into the break zone. And then she's got the hilarious S of Holy, which is an S, Ice, and a Earth. Choose 1 dull forward, deal it 20,000 damage. Search for 1 summon and add it to your hand. That's nuts. She's also a 5 CP AK forward. So she's got a pretty crazy S ability, but you would expect nothing less from Holy. She's a bit of a strange card. What's also worth noting about her text, actually, quickly, is that I discussed this with my local playgroup, and if you were to play Unei, you play Unei, you choose 2 summons in your break zone, but your opponent doesn't select, or the opponent doesn't choose a card to not have played until resolution, because it's select. So you would play Unei, choose 2 summons. If your opponent then had something to be able to remove a particular one of those 2 summons from the game, that would actually mean Unei's ability fizzles. So the other one wouldn't get removed because her ability is fizzled. It also means you don't get to cast a summon either. So Unei, the cost required to cast your summons is paid with CP and any blah 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 blah. But double cast S, when you cast a summon this turn, you may cast 1 summon from your hand with a cost inferior to that of the summon you cast without paying its cost. So obviously Unei, you can pick 2 really high costed cards, and even though your opponent gets to choose which one you don't play, you still get to cast a high cost card, at which point you can then just discard Unei's S to play another probably reasonably high card. Garnet. So Unei would cast a summon, your forwards gain plus 1,000 power through Garnet. Pretty simple, but nice all the same. Summoner and Red Mage. So obviously Red Mage isn't in Unei's colours, but it could still easily happen. But yeah, when you cast a summon, you get to either use Summoner to dull and freeze something, or you get to Red Mage to choose a forward of cost 3 or less and break it, both of which are really good. So if you, say, hypothetically used a Star Sybil to play Unei onto the field, you could then cast a summon, and that might be something like, you know, Raiden. You get to remove something, break something, and then you could use a Red Mage to break something else, or use Summoner to dull and freeze something else. Doga. Okay, so Doga, is when you cast a summon of cost 4 or more, choose 1 backup of cost 3 or more your opponent controls, break it. This effect will only trigger once per turn. So it basically means that when your opponent selects the summon that you have picked, or selects one of the 2 summons that you've picked, they have to consider the fact that Doga's probably going to break something as well. Obviously, if you pick 2 summons of 4 or more, then that means Doga's probably going to break something anyway. But if you, say, pick something like Glaciolabilus, which your opponent really doesn't want to have happen because maybe there's a freeze and a discard happening, but then you cast, or you're choosing a high cost summon, that wouldn't be too detrimental to their game, but they also then have to deal with the fact that Doga's going to break something. They have to start considering, well, I don't want to have to discard and freeze, but then they're also casting, what's a high cost summon? I'm not going to say Diablo because everyone always says Diablo. Another high cost summon. So something like Atomos, for example. Who's a 6 CP summon. It might break a backup. Might break a dull forward they control, which they might be happy to deal with. But then Doga would also break a backup as well. So it makes them have to consider choosing a summon they otherwise wouldn't have chosen if Doga wasn't there. Hope. So yeah, if you cast a summon that is dulling something out, that means you also get to freeze it. If you're casting a summon that gets to reactivate a backup, then you get to reactivate more characters as well. And it's also worth noting that if Unei is cast and you do happen to get a Diablos off of it, and you activate all your backups, with Hope down also means you get to reactivate 2 forwards as well. I should have included this with the Hope section as well, sorry. But yeah, Diablos is really good with Hope because of the fact that you get to reactivate your backups, you've reactivated dull things, which means you also get to reactivate 2 other characters because he states 2 characters. So by reactivating your backups, you also get to reactivate forwards as well. The Mega Sisters. So when the Mega Sisters enter the field, you may search for 1 card and put it into the break zone. So you can play the Mega Sisters to find that summon you want in the break zone because it's too high cost to actually play from hand. Then you play Unei, and again you could use that through the likes of Star Sybil, so you don't have to pay the overall cost of her, as you have just played the Mega Sisters as well. You play Unei, then that allows you to choose the summon that you just put there from Mega Sisters. Now obviously your opponent may be like, well, you've just put that summon there, so I don't want you to play that summon. But let's say you've got, I don't know, an Arc in your break zone. You can play Mega Sisters to search the 2nd Arc from your deck, put that into the break zone, and now, regardless of which one your opponent chooses, they are still getting arced. Lightning. So when Lightning enters the field, choose 1 card named Odin in your break zone, put it on top of your deck. So say you play Unei onto the field, and you pick 7 cost Odin and something else. Your opponent's going to be like, I don't want 7 cost Odin, so you're going to break one of my forwards. So I'm going to pick or rather they are going to pick that card so it doesn't get cast. That then will remain in your break zone and you'll cast the other summon. You can then play Lightning onto the field to put that 7 cost Odin on top of your deck. Yuzuki, so she is a 3 cost 7k water fire forward with the text, if a fire forward you control is dealt damage by your opponent's abilities, the damage becomes 0 instead. If a water forward you control is dealt damage, reduce the damage by 2000 instead. So she's a horrible card for a lot of decks to have to deal with. I have struggled against her quite a few times already. But yeah, so Leviathan for 2 reasons. First and foremost is choose 1 action ability, cancel its effect, so it allows you to stop the likes of Kuchaspel from negating your ability to reduce damage. So if they Kuchaspel, you then Leviathan, it's cancelled. But also, obviously, Yuzuki says that if a fire forward you control is dealt damage by your opponent's abilities, the damage becomes 0 instead. But summons will still hit hard. So using Leviathan, during this turn, if a forward you control is dealt damage by a summon, the damage becomes 0 instead. So it gives that little bit of added protection to your fire forwards. Rosa, if a forward you control is dealt damage, reduce the damage by 1000 instead. So if it's a water forward, that means all the damage they will receive will be minus 3000, which is really, really good. Yeah, and these two work well together. What's interesting about Yuzuki is that with fire forwards, it's only damage dealt by abilities, where with the water forwards, it's any damage your water forwards receive. So that means even in combat or through summons or anything, it's just any damage received, reduce it by 2. With Rosa, it then becomes reduced by 3. Garnet, so similar to Leviathan, if a forward you control is dealt damage by a summon, reduce the damage by 5000 instead. So that would mean your water forwards, if they were taking damage from a summon, the damage will be reduced by 7. That's nothing's going to get around that, really. If you also combo Garnet and Yuzuki with Rosa, it means that any summon damage would be dealing less, or it would be the damage would be dealt. The damage would be reduced by 8000. Ash. When Ash is chosen by a summoner ability of your opponent, Ash gains plus 3000 power until the end of the turn. So if your opponent wants to target Ash and deal her damage through either a summoner ability, she gains plus 3k, but then the damage is also reduced by 2k. And if you combo this with Razzler, the card name Ash you control cannot be broken by opposing summons or abilities that don't deal damage. It now means that Ash will take 2000 less of any damage whatsoever, and when she's targeted, she gains plus 3000 power, and she cannot be broken outright. Obviously, it's worth noting that if her power is reduced to 0, then she is put into the break zone, and that gets around the fact that Razzler stops her from being broken, because being put into the break zone is different to being broken. And then Barsh, because why not? We're talking about Fire Water. Barsh has literally never been played because he's not great, but you know, Barsh, if you control card name Ash, then Barsh gains plus 2000 power, so he becomes a 9k, and he also gains the ability from Yuzuki that if he takes damage from an ability, it becomes 0, so he becomes a little bit better. I wasn't gonna put him in this video, but then when I was looking at Ash, I was like, actually, why not? Gawain. Ugh. This is more to signify the fact that Yuzuki is in the perfect elements for knights. Oh my word, as if knights needed to be any stronger. Obviously, Yuzuki herself isn't a knight, but the fact that most of the knights are water, and that means all your knights now will take, or all your water knights will take 2000 less damage. Bleh. And similarly, Warrior of Lights. So again, your walls will take 2000 damage less, and obviously he's got the fire ability as well. You could combo this with the light, I think it's Opus 2, 3, 4, the light Warrior of Light, which reduces damage that your walls take. So this combined with Yuzuki would be nasty, because all your walls are just taking so much less damage. Cool. What did you think of this week's videos? There are some crazy things you can do in Opus 13. I'm really enjoying this Opus. I think I'm enjoying it a lot more than Opus 12, to be honest. But let me know some of the silly combos that you guys have come up with as well in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe to the video. It really means a lot to me. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video.